So I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of Seed Business School. My name is András Kárpáti, and together with László Eszes, we will be your host today. This is now our second event in our webinar series, and we now have some routine and experience after the first session, which was very successful. Thank you all for joining. But since we're still at the beginning, please accept any small issues or technical problems that we might encounter. We are doing these Seed webinar sessions every Thursday at 4 p.m. Until the end of June. So please check out our website, and you can already register for all of the events. And before we start today's topic, I would like to give you some technical information quickly and run you through how today's session will work. You probably have experienced that all of your microphones are now muted. And I would also like to ask you to stop your video for seamless broadcasting that would be necessary. During the session, you are free to ask any questions. There's a chat icon at the bottom of the screen. Also, please note that these questions are visible to everyone, so you will also have the chance to look at previous comments or reflect on them. And following the presentation, there will be a moderated Q&A session where I will read your questions, and our presenter László will answer them directly. As you probably see, your name or device names are visible to everyone. We have already highlighted this in the registration message. If you would like to change that, you can still do so now. There are 3 dots next to your name, and you can change your name under those 3 dots. On the other hand, I think it's nice to see your names when we are addressing answers to your questions. If you want to see the slides better, you can minimize the participant window in the top right corner. And at the end of the session, we would like to ask your opinion about how much did you enjoy this webinar. So please make sure to stick around for a couple of seconds. It will be a really short poll, but we would really need your feedback. We plan to finish around 5 p.m., but depending on your questions and discussions, we are happy to stay with you for another 10-15 minutes. And now I would like to introduce the topic briefly and our presenter. So the need for change leadership has never been more apparent than now in the crisis. And the objective of this webinar is to share the key learnings of the past few weeks or months and relate them to 3 key elements of effective change leadership. And László will tell you in details. These 3 things are adaptability, agility, and ambidexterity. And László, our presenter today, is originally an industrial engineer. He also has an MBA from the University of Bradford and a doctoral degree in operations research. He has over 20 years of executive management experience in Hungary and in Switzerland at different multinational and international companies like RJ Reynolds and T-Systems. And László is also known as one of the key figures of the management consulting scene, being the first head at A.T. Kearney's Hungarian branch and also being the founder of Grow Group. Currently, he is an independent leadership advisor and coach serving various multinational clients. And he is an active faculty member at Seed Business School since 2018. And with this, I would like to hand it over to László now.
Right, thank you very much, András, and welcome everybody. Good afternoon. And yes, our topic is leading change, and I would like to introduce, my objective is to go practical, but also highlight some interesting backgrounds to leadership, the nature of change, and of course relate them to crisis in general and our current crisis. Exactly 10 years ago, it surprised me when I realized that it was 10 years ago to the day that I was living in this building. You may not recognize this building, but this is the building of the monastery of Segovia, a Spanish monastery. There are many monasteries in Spain, but this is one of the more famous ones. And I was living there exactly 10 years ago. This is when I entered. This was my room, and these are the monks that I've spent a few weeks with. And it was a fascinating experience. it was over 1 year that I had been managing the crisis of my own company. András mentioned that I was running a company by the name Grow, and this company was growing true to its name for 5-6 years before, and the first year of decline was 2009, and that was a tough period. A lot has to be changing our strategy, adjusting our setup, new future leaders emerged. It was a tough time. It's a tough time to be in the change when you are a paid manager, but when you are running your own company, that's even more exciting, I should say. For over half a year, I didn't take any money home. So I've been in the middle of the change and the middle of the crisis. And by May 2010, I felt it was time to go for a little bit of a retreat. So I spent a few weeks in this wonderful environment. I chose a place deliberately where there's not too much talking. My job is to talk a lot, so I needed some weeks without talking. And the rule here, by the way, is that there is only 1 hour in each week when the monks and the guests are allowed to talk. And the remaining 167 hours, they are silent and or praying. But I was lucky that actually 2 times during these 3 weeks, I had a chance to talk to this gentleman who is the leading monk there. And we talked about my situation, the previous crisis, the difficulties, the questions of life. And now somehow I remembered in the middle of today's crisis, what he said to me. And this is a little quote translated to English by Brother Andres, who explained to me that such crises, such critical situations, when you are responsible for other people, tells a lot about you, reveals who you really are, what are your real values, and tells a lot about your personality. And I just remember this quote and wanted to start with this quote because I think that this is extremely important. When you are in a leadership position, you're in the middle of a crisis, that is an opportunity to learn about yourself, learn about your business. I like to see a crisis like a magnifying glass. It is increasing everything. Everything is more intense, more visible, more, you cannot cover up things as well as in normal periods. Everything becomes more apparent and visible. It is an extremely intensive period of change. That's why we chose this topic today, to focus on change in the crisis. But such a period will highlight your own strengths. The weak points are less coverable. Our fears are coming out. Our values are put at test. What is really important for us? These are the moments that are very, very telling. And this is true for individuals. I think we all go through it individually. What are our weak points? What are our fears? What is really important for us? And if we are in a leadership position, same is true. True for our team and true for our business. What are the strengths of our business? What are weak points? What are our true values? We hear about companies who have people as their top value on the wall and all their communication. And 3-4 weeks in the crisis or even before, they immediately, their first step was to start firing people. Well, it's one thing what is written on the wall and one thing how you behave in the middle of a crisis. So let's focus on it. Let's focus on change and leadership. And there are a couple of focus points that I would like to go through. Actually, it's these 4. What is the mindset? the way you relate to change, to a particular change situation, is extremely important on how you behave, what you do, and what you can achieve. Again, basically everything that I'm mentioning is true for an individual, true for a leader, and true for a company as well. I will not repeat it all the time, but please hear it with these words. It can be a small company, it can be an individual leader, or a huge company. Same thing. The second focus point will be what sort of leadership tools we have in our hands that we can use in such situations. The third one is the process. It is not something that you just solve with a one-off action list or with a nice announcement or a revealed new strategy. It has to be a dynamic process, and I would like to talk about that. And the fourth focus area is the perspective that you are choosing. Are you focusing on the short-term operation, or are you looking at long-term? How do you balance the two? That is going to be the topic under the fourth point. So let's get into it, and let's start with mindset. We all experience in ourselves and the people around us that the perceived control over a change and the perceived impact that change makes on us is extremely important on how we relate to that change. I like to place it into this little matrix, and I'm using this matrix a lot with my clients and conversation partners. It's a simple but comprehensive summary of the different positions that you can take up in a change. One dimension is, what do you perceive to be your control over this change? Is it fully on your control? You are driving it, or it is just happening to you, or you can somewhere in between influence it. And the other dimension is, what is your perceived impact on this change, on you or people around you? And there are 6 different typical positions we can take up. First one being, if I have no control over this change and I perceive it to be negative, then I put myself into the victim's position. And of course, this position will determine my reactions. And there are 5 others. I can be just somehow mitigating the negative impact. I can be contributing to something positive, or I can actually drive it. I know a lot of people and companies, this is a natural tendency of people to put them into the position of a victim. This is just happening to me, and this is all bad. And there is this natural attraction of this position, because there is no responsibility. If I'm a victim, then this is just happening to me. I'm not responsible for it. On the other hand, if you're the driver, then you take full control, full responsibility for it. And it is very, very important that we as leaders, we somehow relate to this matrix individually and with our teams. We should be able to discuss with our teams, let it be a leadership team or the whole company, what do we perceive to be impact of this change on us? Let's take this whole COVID crisis situation. Is it something negative? Yes, we are all considering there are a lot of negatives. People are dying, businesses are going down, people are losing their jobs. But let's be honest, there is a lot of positive happening to the world as a result of this crisis. Now, that's true for the small, for the individual, for the companies. We should be able to help our people identify what are the positive or potential positive aspects, and how can we take full control. I would suggest that you use this little tool for a good conversation with yourself and with your team. I have found that just putting up this matrix and having an honest conversation, where are we, where could be, in what aspects of the change do we feel to be in this position or that position, how can we move ourselves to a different position is an extremely revealing and very valuable conversation, and will determine fundamentally how we relate to the crisis, how we relate to the changes that are happening to us, or the changes that we choose to drive as a result. So this is the first aspect, and the second one I wanted to talk to you about is the tools. So what tools do we have in our hands? So okay, let's drive change and let's generate change and let's take the positive out of it. But how? Before going to a little bit of the tools, just to share with you, and this is a great luck that we are after a period where science has developed a lot. In the past 10, 20 years, not all this is not known to the general public or to many of the leaders, but science has developed a lot in terms of understanding human behavior, social psychology, neuroscience, the whole limitation of cognitive biases, how much we are under forces that we are not even aware of in our brains, understanding our habits and how they affect our behaviors, the mechanism of social influence, the whole notion of choice architecture, behavioral economics are results of the past decades, and they are now extremely valuable. Because we have been going with very old and traditional understanding of how change works. Basically, the notion was that change is difficult and people don't like change. So our job as leaders of change is to somehow limit the resistance of people to change. But there is much, much more to that. And we should use this now evolved, better understanding of how behavior works on an individual level, but of course, as leaders, our focus should be in changing in organizations. How organizations change? What does it take? I will introduce you a little model which I find very useful. Of course, I find it very useful. I was leading the team who put it together, but really in experience as well. I have used it a lot with clients and with own company. And basically, this is what we call the 6 conditions of change. These 6 conditions are actually 3 times 2, and just a quick introduction to it. The first 2 is linked to motivation. One element of change of behavior, change individual and organizational level, is that people should have a drive to do this. 2 elements of it, it should be emotionally engaging. There is a heart, minds and hearts. This is how we usually refer to it. So it should be emotionally engaging, moving, as we say it, and it should be rationally understood. It should be clear what is it that we talk about. Now, in the crisis, in this particular crisis, the first weeks were relatively easy in terms of the emotional drive. A key emotional drive is fear, actually. Not the only one, but it can be very, very powerful. And the urgency everybody felt in the first weeks was really, really driving things at an extreme speed. We have all heard these quotes that digital transformation was not driven by the CEOs or the CIOs or the strategy executives, but by COVID-19. Because it generated a sense of urgency that everybody wanted to change. I have talked to CEOs and leaders of various units who reported that in 2 weeks, we have done more to our digital transformation than we had done in the last years. We had big project plans and consultants here and whatnot, and we have achieved a lot. This is, and of course, there's the positive side as well, but it's amazing how much such an emotional drive can do to individuals and organizations. And the second one is understood. We need to be rationally aware of what is happening. That is less so. That is less so at the moment, and I will talk about it in a minute. The other two conditions are to have the skills, to have the feeling that I can do it, that we are able to do it. It's a combination of positive mindset and actual executional skills. And the key factor is the fourth one, involvement. There's a lot of study. If people are involved in finding out, in designing and creating what is to be changed, their engagement is much, much higher. They have ownership over it, which is a key factor. And we would believe that if I think that I should do this and I have some sort of an ownership that I will do it, then it will happen. Now, I don't have a chance to make a little survey about you guys listening, but I'm sure that many of us has experienced that I have a full motivation. Yes, I will start doing more sports, and I will get on a diet, and I have full commitment and ownership over it, and still in 2 weeks' time I give it up. The human being is irrational, so just the motivation, the initial motivation, and just some sort of an ownership and commitment is not enough. There is a huge role of the environment. And two categories. One is the cultural, social environment, how much your peers are supporting you, how much your leaders are supporting you, how much role modeling you see around yourself, how much the culture is such that it is okay to change and experiment with new things, and or how much it is limiting that liberty. And the sixth condition is that the operating environment, that the hard environment, as we call it, should be aligned. Actually, there are very interesting studies and techniques that are showing that just by small changes in the hard environment, in the operating environment, just that one condition alone can result in a lot of change, behavioral change. We call these interventions nudges. And the model, as a combination of the six conditions, is we call the musical model, and it's a great, let's say, checklist that should be on your mind. This is what I have to create or help create as a leader in my organization, for my people, together with my people, towards the changes that we are under. That is our mission. We want to drive change, create these six environments, these six conditions. Sorry. So it's like a checklist. This is the model itself, and the way we are using is actually drilling it down a little bit to more detail, and identifying the factors that are constituting motivation and ownership and support, and basically running a continuous monitoring of the organization, looking at your people. Again, it can be yourself, or it can be the people around you, or it can be a multi-thousand organization. Our responsibility as leaders is to monitor these conditions. And if something is in red, and we have to be honest here, because in the boardrooms or in the leadership committees, it is so easy to assume that we did some communication, it was all right, and we have basically put people right. No, this is not that. So you have to continuously monitor, and if something is in red, take an action. Just some examples. Urgency. I talked about urgency. That so far it was okay. I mean, it was a driving force that resulted in a lot of change, but it is fading away. In this time, people are getting more worn out. People feel more and more safe in terms of physical environment. We are opening up. What is going to give the next drive? Can you give a positive purpose? Key factor in emotional engagement is whether people feel that what is happening is fair, I know companies where they started to cut costs by cutting the salaries of people, and somehow secretly they didn't cut the costs of leaders. I know of a client where the management team, one by one, the top 20, 30 managers, one by one volunteered to go into the same scheme as their people, because this is how they can ensure that there's fairness and they are together in this process. Clarity and transparency, I already talked about it. People want clarity. We are trained to give them clarity. But unfortunately, in this situation, we cannot just stand and say, okay, guys, this is the situation, this is what we are going to do, and this is where we are going to be in 6 months and in 2 years. You can show direction, and here transparency is valued very, very highly. So being asked and involve people in co-creation, I've already mentioned, and the liberty to fail and change the culture into a failure culture, as we say. It doesn't mean that you encourage people to fail several times, but failure for learning means we should fail and learn from it. These are concepts that we have been talking about so much. And I have seen so many leaders nodding at it. Yeah, this makes sense. And actually, this is what we are doing. Well, not that much, or to limited effect. But now the crisis teaches us that we have to take this very, very seriously. But fortunately, we have such a list, and we can go through it and do our best. Now, the third topic that I want to talk about is the process. Okay, so what is the process that we should be following? And this brings up this now very famous term, agility. Everybody's talking about agility. There have been huge agile transformations and huge consulting projects and whatnot. But now, again, the crisis teaches us what it should really mean. Just a little explanation, and I'm saying here, forget the myth, grasp the core. What is the core really? The core is that we should forget what we are used to. That is very simple. What we are used to, this is what we've been socialized for. This is what our brain wants. This is what is sort of the usual pattern. Is this what we call a linear change process or a waterfall process? We understand the situation, then we put together a comprehensive plan. No matter how long time it takes, but we put together a proper plan, and then we implement the plan, and then we see what happens. This is how we are trained. This is I talked to several leadership teams who wanted to do the same in the beginning of the crisis. Okay, so let's have a workshop. Let's have a meeting where we decide on our action plan, and then we are going to implement it. Now, the crisis, in a brutal but very effective way, teaches us that in such uncertain, complex situations, we have to do something very, very different. Well, seemingly similar, but in its core, very, very different. And that is what we call an iterative process. We have to come up with first interventions, of course, and we need to implement them, but then we need to iterate. Check what happens, make an intervention, announce something, change something, and then observe what has happened, what is the impact, and then reiterate. And in such environment, in such an uncertain environment, this iterative process is what is the only way. And what I see is that more and more we realize it, but what is important is that we have the tools to do this process. A very easy way or practical way I usually say is just make a process of what you are doing anyways. What is it that we are doing now at home in the evening when we are listening to the news and planning our actions of our family, or as a leader with the whole company we are doing? continuously the following 4 things. First thing, understanding the situation. What is happening? How does it impact us? What will happen? Where are the risks? What is the most urgent? And traditionally, we as leaders, we would run a I don't know, a diagnosis for the situation. We would ask some consultants, or we would just have a good workshop. That is the situation assessment, the as is. I don't know how many as is workshops I have run. So let's look into the mirror and let's see the situation. Now, you cannot do that in this situation. Understanding the situation is a continuous process. This is what we do day by day. We are looking at what is the virus doing, what is the economy doing, how are our customers reacting, what's showing in our numbers, what is the headquarters saying. It's a continuous process. Same thing, while we are understanding the situation, we are generating ideas. This is not one brainstorming session. This is not one workshop. This is a continuous process. We, on our own lives and with our own, we generate ideas. We cannot even stop it, and we shouldn't stop it. What should we do? What else can we do? And we should invite, of course, others to join this process of idea generation. And then the next thing that we are doing is we are trying things. Maybe this will work. Maybe this will work. Somehow prepare and test and experiment with our ideas, and then we implement it. But even implementation at this stage is not something that you just launch and then lay back and see the KPIs in 1 year. You are monitoring, you are doing it, you are checking it, and you are adjusting. The famous blue check adjust cycle. Again, there is nothing new about it. But what agility really means is to make these processes a systematic one and invite your people to co-create. Now, how do we do that in a physical environment? In a physical environment, what we do is we have these whiteboards that people can see, and the insights are continuously updated. And this whole process is going in a physical form. So, okay, so if we cannot have a workshop, or we cannot have a big whiteboard and the daily stand-ups and whatnot, what do we do? There are, again, very, very simple tools. With some of my clients, we have started to use a simple Trello board. These tools are available. You can set up for these boards and for this 4-element process, an easy Trello board, and then you can connect. And then everybody can continuously monitor our current understanding of the situation, monitor our ideas and generate and collect the ideas and see where is what, and the preparations and our experience with implementation. It's a dynamic, continuous process, not a one-off action plan that is being implemented, and the board is looking at the KPIs. So this is the true nature of agility, and you don't need, and you don't have time for, and really you don't need to start with a brutal agile transformation. What you need to do is make a process of these 4 activities and organize it in a simple way, whatever your system allows, but anybody has access, actually free of charge, to Trello boards, and it's a very easy platform to organize. And the fourth focus point, fourth and last one, is the perspective that you are taking. And I will mention this word, ambidexterity. We don't use it very often, but what it means is the ability to use both hands equally well. There are few people who can do that, and we use this term in terms of an organizational and leadership perspective, in a sense that one of our hands should be looking at the future, setting strategy, the vision, shaping the future, and not just looking at the current business model where we are in, but exploring new business models. That's one hand of a leader or an organization. And the other hand is the more operational. How can we optimize our current business model? How to run our current operation effectively? Now, this is very known. Actually, sometimes referred to it as leadership and management. It's not exactly the same, but similar concepts. There's a little bit of problem, though. The problem is that similarly to the real ambidexterity, very few people can really use use both hands the same way. The same is true for leaders. Research shows, there is actually a very recent research that was conducted in organizations, various sizes of organizations, how the organization sees their leaders, and only 8% of the leaders were considered to be equally good at both hands. Now, this again wouldn't be that bad news, but the real bad news is that about 60–70% of leaders consider themselves to be part of this 8%. And somehow they just don't fit into that 8%. And leaders and organizations can suffer from that if there is no real facing of the capabilities of the leaders. And this is made even more serious in the middle of the crisis where we are now, which is attracting our attention, even the top leaders' attention to running to the operational side, to making sure that people are in the home office, to making sure that our customers are served, which is extremely important. However, there are some current threats to this lack of ambidexterity in an organization. What are these threats or potential traps? The first one is to be seduced into micromanaging the crisis. I know, and I know of leaders of very big organizations who in the first weeks of the crisis, probably even since then, have been working 12–14 hours in the middle of the war room, saving the organization. And rightly so, this focus is rightly so. But especially for leaders who come from that industry or have gone through the different ranks, this is a position which gives a lot of satisfaction. I know my business, I know how it can be fixed. This can be really seducing, and a lot of adrenaline, a lot of pride is generated. And a potential trap is to stay there and forget about the strategic perspective. It feels so nice to be in the war room and direct everybody in a dangerous situation. The other aspect I see and meet leaders who are still talking that, well, let's make sure that everybody is safe, and then let's somehow wait for things to go back to normal. I don't want to force it, everybody's forcing it, but of course, things will never come back to normal. And this way, we can miss the opportunity to gain strategic advantage and focusing so much on the short term that the other hand is not used. The other extreme is to set up this huge strategic analysis and bring in the top consultant to do the job for us. No, we don't have time for that. Faster action needs to be taken. So extremely important is the balance between the two hands. What should be done? The first is to stop, step back, and as I usually say, check both hands. Be honest to yourself as leaders and organizations. It's not just the individual leader. It's not just a question of the CEO. It's of course it's driven from or derived from the CEO, but these are organizational capabilities. Do we have a proper capability looking at the future and exploring future business models, or are we focused on the short term, or the other way around? The next one is a tough one. Empower others for your weaker side. I know many leaders who are very quick to admit that they are not that strong operationally. They are more strategic, because that's a more leader thing to say. But I don't know too many, to be honest with you, who would admit that they are great operationally, they are great running the current business, but looking into the future and looking into the future business models is not their strength. That is a tough job from a CEO. I know few who would admit that side of the unbalance. The solution for these situations is to create new structures. This is really what you have to do. Set up teams for the weaker side, set up new processes, organizational units. I know companies who are now setting up a new company or a new sub-company for their innovative part. The old business, of course, changed, but will need to be running. But now they have woken up that they need to explore the new opportunities, and these two have to be in balance. So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the key points that I wanted to talk to you about. And as a summary, I have 3 messages for you, all collected from this past 40 minutes of talking. The first one is to self-reflect. I mean, this is very important in general, but in these times which are so much sucking us into the operation, most of the CEOs, most of the leaders that I'm talking to are admitting that their actual working hours, operative meeting working hours, are more than what it used to be before the crisis, and it wasn't low then either. So you need to find your time to self-reflect. I put here the picture of the monastery. Find your own monastery. You don't have to go for several weeks in Spain, but find your hours. Find a day when you can self-reflect. In yourself or in your team, there's so much you can learn if you dare, because it takes courage. If you dare to get out of this tempting running of the business and feeling very important because the business wouldn't run without you. Well, if the business wouldn't run without you, you are in a big trouble anyways, but I don't think so. Most of the companies would run greatly, but it's not an easy thing to dare to look into a self-reflective mirror. You need to calm down and learn about yourself and your business. The second is to be humble about the complexity of people and organizations. We don't know. It's not something that you can just make a communication and then people will follow. You can learn from several sources. You can talk to experts. You can learn. You can read about it. Take your time. But the most important is this humbleness on the complexity of people and organizations. This is much more complex, and we are learning it now than sometimes we assume. And the third thing is just to experience. I mean, don't make huge transformation projects. Pick simple tools, practical tools, experience, dare to experience, put them into practice and see what works for you and see what doesn't. So thank you very much. I see I managed to keep the time, which is usually an issue for me, and now I'm very open for questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Lotzi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so now we would like to ask you to send your questions via the chat icon at the bottom of the page. And while you're preparing these or thinking about your questions, we already have actually a question from our friend Sandy, which is basically related to the slide that you talked about, ambidexterity, with the two hands. That there are some companies who are trying to actually address, especially in a challenging situation, in a way that they're appointing co-CEOs, like, like there's an operational guy, there's a strategic guy, one for each side. Are you aware of any evidence of this structure? Do you have any experience with that? And do you see that, is it better or worse in a crisis situation than the regular single CEO setup? What do you think?
Well, I think the two CEOs. First of all, I don't know any company which would be organized as a response to the crisis in this setup. But if it's not two CEOs, but let's say a CEO and a deputy CEO, or the CEO of the let's say the old company and the CEO of the new company, which is out there exploring new business models, or I know a company which just now named one of the board members responsible for strategy. It's a 4-person board, and the strategy, the topic of strategy and vision and new business has been raised now just 2 or 3 weeks ago to the level of the board. So two CEOs, maybe not in the same level, because there has to be somebody who's ultimately responsible, but close to two CEOs, and clear responsibilities of who's running the now and who's running the future is I know of, and it can be a very, very good solution.
Okay, let me ask you a personal question. You talked about formatting new strategic directions. Now, do you think that's possible now in these days when you're in a home office mode? How do you see that?
Well, I've been asked that question before, and just recently I had a conversation with a CEO who said, "Oh, this is very, very tough. These calls for the strategic purpose is not working effectively." So he was saying that well, let's wait until we can get together. Of course, we continue with the strategic thinking, but he felt that the real strategy stuff needs to be live. Of course, it is better. This is what we are used to. My point to this is that you have to keep the strategy process rolling even in this phase. Of course, it has to be different. You cannot go for two-day offsites and so forth. But it's a continuous process, so it's doable. But for some leaders, some leaders find it easier. Some leaders are really struggling with it.
Okay. We have a question about agility. You know, we have this buzzword now, agile. Organizations are turning agile. Do you think these organizations who already started the process and now consider themselves agile can respond better to crisis situations?
Well, it's too early to say. I read an article recently. It was, I don't know, in one of the Hungarian magazines about this question. I think it's too early to tell. Those organizations who have invested a lot of money on agile transformations, you know, with the big consultants and fundamental turnaround, they claim and hope that they will respond better. We will see. I certainly cannot tell. I think the industry where you are in is a bigger factor than that. I hope yes, but I have, you know, it's only few companies who can afford and go that way, you know, this big consultant-led transformation. My notion, and this is what I emphasized here as well, is you don't need to start being agile in your organization. You don't need big consultant transformation. You can start with very simple principles. And one principle I talked about is forget the linear waterfall thinking and put in place iterative, and dare to be iterative, dare to say that I don't know yet, but we will try this and we shall see. And it is okay to experiment. This is This sounds like a simple principle. It is not easy to do, but a very effective first step. I have a client, a managing director, and we were talking actually early this week, preparing for exactly this process in their organization. And he said that you know, we have to start with very, very small but very important steps. And this is the first step, to acknowledge that we don't know it all. And we can experiment. And the second principle is just participation. And again, there are big words, co-creation and empowerment and whatnot. Involve, don't assume that the top few leaders will know everything. Involve people and delegate the decision. Dare to delegate the decision to levels which was not there before. If you start with these two principles, you are on a very, very well route towards agility.
Okay, okay. We have another question from Frank about your recommendations regarding the tools. Do you think these tools can equally be used across industries, like, you know, such as manufacturing and service? Do you see this as a general tool set, or you see this differing across industries?
Well, to the extent I have explained it today, I think they are generic, because I explained them in a generic way. So tools, you can always sit down and look at where you are versus the crisis. You have to, no matter what industry. In fact, as an individual or as a family or a group or any sort of human community, in order to change, you need those 6 conditions. Or these simple principles of agility that I talked about, or this whole ambidexterity concept, which is running the operation and looking ahead. I think on this level, on this generic level, these are applicable for all industries, but it needs to be applied in different ways. Today, the most important is how much that industry happens to be hit by the current crisis. We know that there are companies, small companies especially, who have already closed down and finished business, while there are others who are benefiting from the crisis. So I think it's the extent to which you have been hit by the crisis that will drive a little bit or specify a little bit the way you should use these tools.
Okay. I think we have a very good and exciting question from Gabor. Have you seen a company culture change without serious replacement in the management on C-level? If yes, then what led the management to do that change themselves? Is a crisis situation enough to do that actually?
Well, a simple answer is no. I haven't seen. I have seen projects which were called culture change programs. Without changes in the top management, and all of them have failed. And I haven't seen significant real cultural change program without a personal change in the top management. To me, it's almost a differentiator, whether we are serious, whether we are serious about it at all. So the simple answer is no, and where there's no personal change, then it's you know, we are okay, we the leadership, we are fine, but you guys should change. I've seen a lot of that, and that's something else.
Okay, we have a very practical question from Attila actually about the check and action list that you referred to as well. Do you see a best method, or do you have a recommendation on a method to measure the so-called competencies, the inside skills, they're not so tangible capabilities for further action or individual education? Or is it just HR science? That's a big question mark.
Well, it's a big HR thing, and there are different types of competencies. One is, let's say, the technical ability, the knowledge, that you need, or a previous experience that you need for a certain job. But in this environment where we are now, it is more it is different type of competencies that we are looking at. The whole mindset, how you relate to changes, is one of them. Flexibility, the willingness to learn and experiment. In today's time, the technical skills change so rapidly that it's not those that we need now, but people who are ready to positively explore, who have the curiosity, who have the capability to put things together, to see things from the perspective. And these competencies are relatively easy to experiment. I mean, you know who those people are. So I would say these skills, a leader, a manager should be able to assess if described properly, and that is usually what is missing. When we look at a CV, when we look at a candidate or somebody from a competence, we tend to look at some traditional learning, knowledge and experience stuff, and some very basic behavioral elements. You need to be focused on identifying who you consider to be your potentials, what potential means for you, and to describe those competencies and look for them. And the more technical skills are relatively easy to do, and it's definitely not an HR stuff. HR's role is to help leaders do that. It's 90% a leader's job. I know many companies where leaders are complaining, HR hasn't brought me good candidates, and HR hasn't done it. We haven't filled in this managerial position because HR is not doing their job. Well, of course, HR has to help with the process and identification, but selection of the people, selection of the good people, understanding of the capabilities, this is 90% a leadership job. We like to outsource it to HR, but try not to.
Okay, Robert is asking a question about partly what I also asked previously, is how can you work on strategy now when everything is changing from day to day? But you know, he specifically asks about supply chain is changing. So do you see an issue there?
Well, certainly there is an issue. It's a huge difficulty. And then supply chain, of course, has been hit significantly, and this is where this ambidexterity issue also comes in. There are leaders, and I know leaders, and it's a fuzzy term, I know, but I know leaders of that 8% that I mentioned who are excellent in seeing the future. I know it's not an exact term, but some leaders have this superb sense of knowing where the industry, where the world is going, and being able to make the right judgment. Sandy told us some great examples of great companies and great leaders last time, and has followed up since then on the example of Amazon, who made the first step, the right step, and basically they are more or less a logistics company, but of course much more than that. So there are some leaders who see the future and dare to make these tough calls, even in such an uncertain environment. But those who are not talented with that or not there to make those steps, then I would say it's the strategic agility. Again, a very fuzzy term, but what does it mean? Also on a strategic level, you need to experiment. Set up a new company, set up a new unit with different type of technologies, different type of solutions, and don't assume that you will just have to make the big call now, but experiment, try, but dare to respond. Look at them as startups. Start 5 startups, and two will work in such uncertain environments and supply chain is surely one of them. These two are probably the best solutions, much better than hope that that good old days will return.
Okay, I think
we have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Yes, we have more, but I would say let's stick to two. One, Zoltan is asking that, or saying that they have actually 7 different consultants at their company currently.
Oh. Well, it just depends on who they are.
Yes, and well, the question is, how could I align them having one common direction? Well, easy to say 5 or 6.
Well,
but
depends on what
do you have any experience in that? What is your suggestion?
Well, of course, it's the CEO and the top team who should align them. Well, depending on the size of the company, the type of the consulting job. Certainly, if it's a conscious experimentation and conscious usage of various brains and various ideation pools, I think that's a good one. You know, I would certainly use the top consultants to ideate with me. If I can afford, but to have them move in different directions, and especially if those are not aligned, certainly not going to help. Is the top team, the CEO, the top leadership team who should align them, or combine their efforts. I have seen in these times, and I have worked as a consultant in consulting teams, consultants from very different industries. For example, when I ran my company, which was in organization development, leadership development, more on the soft side, if you can say that. Very often we worked with McKinsey or BCG hands in hand. To put it very simple, they manage the hard side, we manage the soft side. That can work, but then these consultants very much need to be aligned by the top team.
Okay, and the last question, and those who did not have the chance to get an answer to the questions, we will provide the chance for you to send your questions in email after this webinar, but I will announce that when we close today's session. So the last question from Andre, actually, in these times, would you support or rather advise to stop or maybe pause huge organizational cultural changes triggered before the crisis?
Well, that's cultural changes, right? Well, there are very different views of cultural change. One view is that you cannot make cultural change, it is happening. It is happening to you anyways. It is something that you can influence and somehow stir, but it's not something that you can just decide and do in a half year or even a 1 year project. This is one view. And the other view is that if you're very diligent, then you can put together a culture change. My thinking, and especially in this time, is that you should never stop your consciousness about the cultural direction that you would like to go into. So, for example, if your new culture, I'm working with such a company. They have been working for over 3 years now. Many things, but including it, that is culture. And the key word of that cultural change was customer experience. That we were not a customer-focused company, and now we are a customer-oriented company, or we will be, or we are moving gradually. Now, don't stop that. Don't stop emphasizing that. In fact, grab the opportunities to reflect. Okay, guys, so now we are in a crisis. No, we cannot meet our clients in person. We know we have to go digital. How do we exercise and how do we do customer orientation and customer service in this environment? So keep it in the focus, keep it in the constant focus. Probably if it's about, I don't know, running culture understanding workshops, probably you can stop that or run them differently. But the consciousness, the reflection, the priority setting, the selection of people, the highlighting and the observation of people. I said in the beginning that this crisis, or any crisis, this one as well, is a great test. Use it as a test. I mean, when it is business as usual, then your managers, your executives might look similar, but you will see how they behave in the crisis. Who are the ones who behave as a reflex in the middle of the emergency, who react in a way that is in line with your desired culture, and who are the ones who are not? Actually, we are having such conversations with some of the CEOs that I'm talking to, that this is like a huge, what is called assessment center, if you like. This is an organized assessment center, and you are observing your people, your managers, and you see who is reacting how, and you should strengthen and select and promote the ones whose natural reflex in such an emergency situation is towards the culture that you want to see. So don't stop it, but use different forms and embrace the huge opportunities for further cultural formation in the middle of the crisis.
Okay, I think that was a very good closing sentence. Now, Lottie, please move to the next slide. And dear participants, before you go, I would like to ask your opinion about today's webinar. So please, take a moment to fill this poll, which I'm sharing now. So between 1 to 7, please push a number how you felt. Okay, thank you very much. Before we close today's session, I would like to thank you again for joining us. And please make sure to log in next week as well. And before logging in, please register. We will have another Lottie, Otsil this time, who will talk about brands and how brands can stay authentic in times of crisis. So with that, I would like to thank you again. Oh, sorry, one last comment. We will, following this webinar, the video and the presentation, the slides will be available on our website. So from next Monday, you will have the chance to look at this webinar again, check Lottie's slides, and also ask questions via email. You will get a reminder in an email, so you don't have to write it down now, the email address. You will get all details in a message from us. So with that, I would like to thank you very much. Hope to see you next week. And well, it's getting sunny, so enjoy the weekend as well. And take care and stay healthy.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Bye-bye.